And welcome once again, my friends, to the next episode here, the Red Delta Project podcast, live feed Q&A, where we are making fitness easier by taking a fundamental approach to diet and exercise. As always, I'm Matt Schifferly, and today's episode is sponsored by the entirety of the Red Delta Project library. All these books you see behind me here, Grind Style Calisthenics, Overcoming Isometrics, Micro Workouts. These books I'm going to be referencing a lot in today's episode, and links to all of them on Amazon are down below in the description. So today's episode is a sequel from last week's episode, where in last week I was talking about the basic cornerstones of building your first 10 pounds of muscle, because everything changes with that first 10 pounds. You look better, you feel better, you perform better. It's when you really notice that your weightlifting and strength training efforts are starting to bear some real fruit and motivation starts to really spool up. But that's the first 10 pounds. And basically the gist of that episode was talking about you want to focus on the most basic fundamental exercises and dietary patterns. Don't get lost in all of the noise and all of the exciting things that are trying to distract you in these social media times. Instead, you want to really prioritize finding the habits that are the easiest for you to stick with consistently for months and maybe even several years at a time. Not that it's going to take many years to build those first 10 pounds. Hopefully it'll be within around first 6 months to a year potentially. But nonetheless, we want to establish the habits that are pretty easy for you to just be consistent with. But the unfortunate thing is there's so much noise and distraction out there that it's hard to do that when one person's saying you've got to train this way, the other person saying, no, that's terrible, you got to train this other way. And you just kind of run around in proverbial circles, getting lost in paralysis by analysis and not really going anywhere. So that's the first 10 pounds. What about the second 10 pounds or more gains after that? Well, those basic ideas of establishing your fundamental consistent habits is certainly going to be a cornerstone for your lifelong gains. But what gets you from 0 to 10 pounds to 10 pounds and 20 or even more, you're going to be playing a bit of a different playbook. Not that you're going to be doing anything wholly different, but you have to take things to a much higher level as far as going deeper with your habits rather than just broader. And one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people fail to have the escape velocity to go past those first 10 pounds is because they originally did something different in their lifestyle. They go to the gym, they start doing a new exercise, and they build on those first gains. And then they think, oh, in order to keep moving forward, I've got to do something radically different again. Or they went from saying, well, I kind of worked out every once in a while and my diet was hit or miss. And then they got really dialed in, really disciplined, and they started to put some more effort into it. And as a result, they got more consistent and they started to make those first 10 pounds. But then they think, well, if some work got me to 10 pounds, then it's just going to be exponentially more work to the next 10 pounds and more progress after that. And yes, that can certainly happen. It can be helpful, but always remember that hard work is really difficult to scale. You're going to make a lot of progress from hard work as a beginner, but the more advanced you become, the less working harder is going to make that much of a difference, because you're running into one, diminishing rate of returns, and two, you're basically kind of doing the same thing, just more of it. Because remember, when we don't honestly know what we're doing, the default for a lot of people just comes to work harder, which means do more of the same thing. So you end up just doing a lot more volume, or you add in an extra workout, or you consume more protein. And while that can work and help a little bit, you've got higher costs, a lot more effort, and you're going to hit a wall a lot faster. So in order for you to break out of that kind of work harder, work yourself into the ground kind of mentality, we want to take a different tact when it comes to getting even better results. And that's going to be a bit different from what you got for those first 10 pounds. And it's one of those things that we'll be diving into today. But first and foremost, my apologies for those coming out. And Gatsu is saying, I'm wondering why you didn't go live yesterday. My sincere apologies, my friends. I totally forgot, literally until the last minute, that I had volunteered to help my friend test for his 7th degree black belt in Taekwondo. And those testings can be kind of an all-day affair. And it was last minute. Not that I didn't know that was last minute, but I was literally there in the testing board and everything going, Oh, wait a minute. Shoot. And so my apologies. I did not mean to leave you guys hanging. And while we're on that topic, I'm also going to have to be doing this on Sunday next week as well for another Taekwondo function. I have a tournament that I'm going to be attending, and this is our at-home tournament. This is the home field, so to speak. And it's always one of those things of, well, you don't have to be there, but it is the home tournament, so be there. You have to be there. So while we would usually be having our live feed fireside chats here, I'll be probably getting my ass kicked by Mr. Dillon, who always does me a few bumps and bruises and maybe a cracked rib in the free sparring ring. But Gregorius can say, can I start doing all of the big 6 bodyweight movements on the isometrics manual altogether instead of start doing only one, as Paul Wade says? Absolutely, for sure, especially when it comes to overcoming isometrics. One of the great things about overcoming isometrics is that it is such a low cost type of training in both energy and time, but also doesn't beat up the body very much. It's one of those things that's very hard on the muscle, but it's very gentle on a lot of the other systems, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so great. So when we're looking at isometric training, scale it to whatever your abilities are. In fact, we could just say that's the way we should approach any sort of new discipline or any type of a new program that's out there. And I understand what Coach Wade is saying when he's like, scale back, start off nice and easy and stuff, because a lot of people, when they're starting off, especially with something new like overcoming isometrics, calisthenics, kettlebells, whatever, they get a little overzealous and they start working as hard as they possibly can. And as a result, they burn out really quickly and they end up quitting. Or they get some progress and they think, well, I'm working as hard as I can, and now I've got to work as hard as possible just to maintain this. And we can take that lesson to the acute approach as well in our workouts. Like with overcoming isometrics, I did a chest workout today. And usually, especially with overcoming isometrics, you can just immediately go as hard as you possibly can. And it's a lot harder to ramp up from that point. You're just like, go 100% kind of thing. But lately, I've been experimenting with starting off a little bit easier. So I start off with a lower level of weight that I need to get the beeps going on the isomax and leveling things up and letting my body ease into it for a couple of sets. I took the same approach today for my first mountain bike ride. When mountain biking today over at Green Mountain. And man, if there's one thing that I've learned kind of the hard way is that first ride of the season, it doesn't matter how much I've worked in the gym. It doesn't matter if I've been skiing and stuff all winter. That first ride is always painful. It's always a stinger. My lungs are in my throat. It's exhausting. It's tiring and everything. So today I did the Green Mountain, rode up the Rooney Trail and stuff. I was very proud of myself that I didn't dab on that because I usually do the first couple rides of the season. But I took it relatively easy. I didn't push as hard as I could all the time. I kind of cruised on a couple of sections. And yeah, of course, that ride really hurt, but it wasn't something that totally kicked my tail. And I'm not feeling like I now need to lay down for the rest of the day. So taking the same approach with Paul Wade's recommendation is don't go all out. However, I would also counter that by saying, dude, if you want to do more, go for it. If you want 3 or 4 exercises or all 6, have at it. Because especially when you're kind of diving into a new discipline like isometrics, you kind of feel like a kid with a new toy, especially if you literally do have a new toy like the ISO chain or the ISOmax. You're like, I've got all these great things I want to do. I don't want to wait to play with my new toys. I want to have fun with it. Well, then by all means, just remember to be a bit prudent with your applications there. Don't feel like you've got to go all out for the first several weeks. Take your time, because anytime you're subjecting your body to a new stimulus because you're doing something new, I guarantee you it's producing results. Anything new is going to do that for you. So be patient, have fun with it. And if you want to do more, by all means, go for it. All right. So we're talking about building this next 10 pounds of muscle. And in order to do that, it's less about establishing your habits, establishing your consistency, getting into the groove with your workouts. It's much more about taking your current habits and leveling those suckers up. And one of the things that really holds people back is they keep changing to different habits. They just do things differently, but they never do anything better. So they're on the free weight kick for a while, then they're on machines, then they're doing powerlifting, then they're doing bodybuilding, then they're just working out in their garage with a pull-up bar and a couple of kettlebells. They're always changing what they're doing differently, which is fun. It's good to do. But make no mistake about it, that the more advanced results you get in anything doesn't come from doing things differently. It comes from doing the same thing to a higher level. And that can be very difficult to achieve, especially if you don't know what you're doing, because it's not necessarily more hard work, because your practice sessions are probably going to be about the same amount of time. You're largely going to be doing the same exercises, basically the fundamentals, especially push, pull, and squatting movements. So you're not really looking at what you're doing on paper as being any different. But where you're going to have most of your new progress coming from is leveling up your proficiency in those exercises. So if you're, for example, using dumbbells as your main tool for your strength and muscle building efforts, you're like, yep, I've got the dumbbell bench press, I've got this going on. Well, chances are, like a lot of people, they're like, dumbbell bench press. They maybe watch a quick video on YouTube or even some pictures in like a strength training manual. You're like, okay, dumbbell bench press. Okay, that's what that is. Great, I got it. But very few people ever go beyond that. They don't investigate more to the basic fundamentals. And whenever you find people who have an advanced level of proficiency in most any discipline in life, you'll find that they're hungrily investigating more advancement in the most basic elemental techniques of their craft. So basically, it's like you could be doing calisthenics for 20 years. After 20 years, you're still trying to figure out, how do I do my push-ups better? How do I deadlift better? How do I improve these kettlebell swings? You don't ever find someone very advanced saying, yeah, I know how to do pull-ups. I don't need to learn anymore. Oh, I don't need to learn to do a side kick or the front kick and stuff. We learned front and side kick the first day of Taekwondo. But if you talk to like my friend who achieved his master's level yesterday, he's like, what are you working on sidekick? He'd give you at least 3 things he's working on. And be like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm trying to get this better between my right and left side and stuff. He's still leveling up his sidekick, even though he's been doing it 30, 40 some odd years. So that's the biggest lesson to take away of building those next 10 pounds. It's not going to be doing anything radically different. It's not going to be doing anything fancy even. It's, excuse me, that cold mountain air is still getting to me. It's all about taking what you're already doing and leveling up to a higher elevation. You're really getting good at these sorts of things. And a lot of this is going to come from your skill and proficiency. It's not going to always be about more weight, more reps, more workouts and stuff. That stuff is usually a consequence of leveling up your proficiency. So I know a lot of the question may be, well, then how do I do that? And that's always a good place to start, but that's a little bit harder to figure out. And that's why a lot of times when we're looking at building up that next 10 pounds of muscle, we're really actually, now is a good time to start investing in maybe some one-on-one coaching. Because a coach is simply someone who's traveled further down the path and knows where you need to go. In Japan, the word for any sort of teacher or coach is sensei. And the characters for sensei literally mean previous life or before in life. Basically, this is someone who's walked the path before you got a chance to do it, and now they can show you the way. And we want to have the same thing. Someone who has already achieved more than you have in whatever you're trying to do, building muscle, being able to improve your pull-ups, being able to increase your strength in whatever you're doing. Find someone who has already been where you want to go, and they can help you achieve that as well. Of course, yeah, in fitness, there's always, the genetically gifted or the people who have what they've got because of less than honest means, like using steroids and stuff. But even then, you're talking about people who have achieved something that you're after. So you want to be able to tap their brain and be like, how did you do this? And it's not to say that you need to do what they did, because everybody follows their own path. Everybody figures out what works best for them. And especially when it comes to getting more advanced levels, you're going to need to find that out for yourself and what works best for you the more advanced you get. It's kind of like, if you took 100 people You're like, okay, everybody want to build 10 pounds of muscle? Great. Okay, everybody do the same program, the same kind of diet, the same exercises. Everybody do the same thing, and most everybody will get there. However, getting to that next 10 pounds, it's like, okay, Jimmy over there, he's having a real hard time getting the back squat to really work for him, but he's getting a lot better results from the hack squat machine. Okay, Jimmy, you're going to do hack squat machine. And Susie over here, she's getting really good results, but she really doesn't like these protein shakes. So we're going to do something other than the protein shakes and stuff. The more advanced you get, the more diverse you're going to find methods. And that's why you'll often find sometimes those folks on the Instagrams and the experts in the social medias, it's like, well, how in the world does that happen? This guy's big and jacked and awesome, and he does high volume training. And this other guy does big, jacked, and awesome, and he does low volume training. How in the world does that happen? Simple. They figured out what works best for them. That's kind of a little bit of the curse with all coaches, is we usually think what works best for us is just best in general. And that's a trap that we can find ourselves in. Like me, calisthenics all day long. This is best for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be best for you. It doesn't mean that it's what you should do. If you do calisthenics for a month and you're like, this is not working, I hate doing this. Everything about it feels wrong and off, and my joints don't feel good, and I'm just craving the barbell. Well, then listen to your body. Listen to your intuition, because it's usually more correct than some Yahoo on internet, because that's the feedback that you're getting. That's experience. You definitely want to be listening to that sort of stuff. Let's get to some more questions here. Christopher is saying, hey, Matt, you mentioned in another video something about quality fatigue. Can you define both what is high quality fatigue and low quality fatigue and how both can happen? So yeah, basically we're looking at how fatigue factors into your objective, your training stimulus to begin with, and whether or not having more fatigue is going to be beneficial or not really that beneficial. So case in point, when it comes to building muscle, the ability to bring the muscle to a high state of fatigue is heavily correlated with creating a stimulus for hypertrophy. So we don't want to be fresh at the end of the session. In other words, if you're doing push-ups and you're like, oh yeah, I could do 1,000 more push-ups, probably not the best way to go about it. But if you're doing push-ups and you're really getting out those last few reps, you're creating more fatigue. So more fatigue, good for that type of stimulus. Also, if you're trying to go for endurance and stamina. Now, you can always do more work. You can always create more fatigue. But the question we want to be asking ourselves is, am I doing better or am I just doing more of the same? So if you're doing your push-ups and you're just grinding out and your muscles are screaming bloody murder and you're like, woo, yeah, oh boy, those are woken up. Oh boy, got a good pump and everything going on. But you keep going, and 10 minutes later, your muscles are like, dude, I've got it. I know you. Yes, I know. Fatigue, push-ups and burning and pump. Yeah. It's kind of like if, I know I do this sometimes when someone's explaining something, and after a while, you're like, okay, I'm starting to understand, and they explain it a different way. And you're like, okay, all right, I've got it. And they explain it again. And they're like, yeah, okay, I've got it. And they explain it again. And you're like, dude, Roger that, I've got it. And they explain it again. And you're like, I've got it already. Shut up. I have a habit of doing that myself. You're kind of doing the same thing. When we are training, we are essentially teaching our muscles how we want them to behave, what we want them to do. So the more new and fresh information is in a given workout, the more effective at creating that stimulus is. But the more it just becomes redundant, same information over and over, it's not really doing anything, but it's costing you a lot more time and energy and eating into your recovery. So that high quality fatigue is one, recognizing if that fatigue is even correlated with your objective for your training, which I'll get into in a bit. And two is recognizing, okay, I've got some good fatigue. I think I've pulled the trigger on what I'm trying to accomplish in my workout here, and I'm done. I'm going to pull the plug there. I could keep going, but I just needed to create a good amount of fatigue. I need the muscle burning, pumping, but boy, my performance is starting to really go downhill. You're done. You don't just keep working. Remember, we fall into the trap of just endlessly working harder when we don't know where we're going with our workouts. It's like driving to a destination. If you don't know where that destination is, you just keep driving. You don't know where to stop because you don't have a stopping point. It's the same thing with your workouts. You want to be clear on what you're trying to accomplish in your workouts. And I usually just define that by when fatigue starts to really accumulate. I've been doing that a lot more with the isomax. I'm holding and I'm really ramping up, and I always check the max right after each, round. And the max is going up, going up, going up, going up, going up. But eventually I'll do a set, and instead of like 150 pounds, it'll be like your max was 130, and then 120, and then 98. I'm like, okay, I'm on the downward slide. I'm not making my muscles work really all that harder. I'm not putting more tension. Sure, I could keep going. That's the thing with overcoming isometrics. You have no failure point, which is great. But why? Why keep going? I'm not making my muscles do anything harder or better than what it had before. There's no real point in going. And then finally, like I was saying about working harder at an objective, like today's objective with my mountain bike ride was I'm just trying to get out. I'm getting my legs back underneath me, feeling the bike, making sure it's working properly. And I'm just going to have some quick sprints and get that first hard ride under my belt. Didn't need to be blasting the hell out of myself. So I did one lap of Green Mountain, which is kind of a light ride for me in the mid-season. But, at the end of that, I was also really cold. It was pretty chilly, windy and everything. I was like, you know what? Mission accomplished. I got what I came here for. I'm done. I'm going home and I'm going to make some soup. So it wasn't like I felt the need to keep working myself to death, because what would that have done? What another lap have possibly done? I would have gotten more tired. I would have gotten more cold. It would have eaten more time into my day, which has been really busy today. It would have cost me more, but all I wanted to do was get that first ride in and get my legs working again and feel my heart rate in my throat. Mission accomplished. I don't need another lap to do that. So I didn't need to, because I knew exactly what I was trying to get out of that ride. So that was having enough fatigue. Appropriate fatigue, I guess, is what you could say for the quality fatigue. Quality fatigue comes from appropriate fatigue and enough fatigue, rather than just wrong fatigue. XY is saying, fast question, if I may, I've started working out with rings. Good, since my leg is broken. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. And wonder if I'll doing calisthenics with an airwalk or prosthetic will make me my weight loss too much. It's heavy. It's a heavy prosthetic. No, I don't think so. I mean, you work with what you got, man. And as you said, I think you started working with rings, right? So you have no baseline to go off of. And this is why sometimes when we start with something, that can be a good thing to do, because you don't know what you're supposed to do. You could be doing dips on your rings and you're like, well, I got eight dips. Okay. Is that good? Like, what is that? How does that compare? Because ring dips versus bar dips are very different. Or if you've never really done dips on rings, you have no baseline. So with that airwalker on, it's like, okay, I've got this thing on. Is that heavy? Is that affecting it? Who knows? It doesn't really matter. Do what you can right now, and then build and progress from there. And that's where the results come. Because as we're talking about those next 10 pounds of muscle, remember that it's going to come largely from progressing what you can currently do, not what you're currently doing. So I don't care what you're doing now. Like, I'm doing dips, I'm doing push-ups, I'm doing rows and pull-ups on the rings and all this good stuff, and I've got a broken leg. Okay, great, fine. That doesn't tell me anything about your ability to get results, though, because you do anything, but you never get results from what you're currently doing. You get results from how you're improving what you're currently doing. So you go from 8 dips to 12 dips next week. Great, awesome, good. You're moving forward. You're adding your time under tension. You're getting more repetitions in. Maybe you're getting a little deeper even. You're adding mobility. You're adding strength, because your muscles have to be stronger for those deeper ranges of motion. So go with whatever you can do now. Don't worry about it. And then seek that progression, because it's the progression that's going to be the best way to go about it. And speaking of progression, when it comes to building those next 10 pounds of muscle, it's not all just in the workout. Lots of times, in my experience of working with folks over the past 20 years in the gym, a lot of times that second 10 pounds, it's not a lot of times it's not coming from exercise or changes in exercise outright. Because a lot of folks, they dial in the exercise portion pretty good. If you've got consistent workouts, hitting that muscle a couple times a week, basic fundamental exercises, you're working on getting better technique and improving your tension control and stuff, that's all you can really hope for from your workouts. That's as good as you can possibly get. Yeah, my workouts have progressive resistance and I'm doing basic exercises. Good. Workout's probably about as good as it's going to get then. But a lot of times, what usually gets people to that coveted second 10 pounds in those new gains, it's finally taking the other things outside of the gym more seriously. That's the stuff that we get really our attention focused on. It's like, oh, I got this workout and I got this type of thing and I got this in my home gym and I'm doing this sort of thing. But if you ask a lot of folks, especially for the first 6 months to a year or so of their training, how's your sleep doing these days? They're like, I don't know. I don't really think about it very much. Well, that's probably where your next 10 pounds of muscle is coming from. It's getting better sleep, especially if you're kind of struggling with sleep. It's like, I probably am up until midnight scrolling through social media, and I've got an alarm clock forcing me awake at an early morning and got to get to the my job and everything. It's like, yeah, if you dial in your sleep, that's probably going to make a big difference. Because a lot of times the stuff that holds us back, it's not the workouts, it's the recovery in the workout from the workouts that gets us the best bet. There was an ebook I bought years ago. This was, in the early 2000s, back when ebooks were like a big thing. And it was all about building muscle and building strength and getting better at your workouts and everything. And it was something like 50 tips for building muscle or something. I think 48, 48 out of those 50 were all about recovery. Almost nothing in there was about exercise. It was like, dude, you got the exercise portion already. You know what a bicep curl is. You know what a bench press is. You got all that stuff already. I'm not going to hammer that stuff to death because you got that already. But are you getting good amounts of protein during the day? Are you eating enough? Are you able to take some time off and let your nervous system settle down? All of those things. That's probably where your next 10 pounds is going to come from a lot of progressive perspectives. It's the stuff outside your workouts that's going to make the biggest difference. All right. Joseph coming on in saying, hey, Matt, I do close grip push-up, pike push-up, and row versions, then lunge for 5 minutes. Woohoo! What a leg burner. Do you think it might be worth my while to superset my legs? And you cut it off a little bit there. Superset the legs with, probably the upper body stuff. Well, here's where some of our programming comes into play. So I meant to mention this a little bit later, but now's as good a time as any, is that you're not only progressing your workout technique, but you're programming as well. Because your programming is it's not going to make or break your results, but it's going to set the stage for your performance. So here's an example for this. Let's say you do superset your lunges and stuff, because I know 5 minutes, that's probably a lot to do. That's probably a fairly tedious thing to go for. I mean, seriously, everybody try that. Like a minute of an exercise is a long time to do something for. 5 minutes is, you're one crazy mother there, Joseph. That's all I got to say. So it can be tedious. It's like, what if I just broke it up so that way it's not as tedious? I'm guessing that's kind of where you're going for with that, I'm assuming. But the thing to look for when we are trying to create a stimulus for hypertrophy and building strength and stuff is we want to make sure that we're really pushing the muscles themselves, the muscle tissue. But every time you do an exercise of any type, you have lots of variables involved. You've got your cardiovascular endurance, you've got your mental endurance, you've got your stability, mobility, tension control. You've got all these other variables that are also being challenged and tested with any form of training. So if you program your workouts or you're doing certain types of exercises where you find that you're really kind of out of breath and it's your cardio endurance that's getting the most challenged, and when you're doing your push-ups, your muscles are like, yeah, okay, this is hard, but it's really not that challenging because you're just, heart is in your chest. Why? Or heart is in your lung, your throat. You have a different limiting factor. So you're not able to push your muscles as hard. So when you're going about your programming with something like this, maybe that leg stuff could be a good way to go about it, because if you're breaking it up, then maybe you can push your legs even harder because you're not as mentally fatigued from doing it for 5 solid minutes. But on the other hand, you could look at it and say, yeah, but I do my lunges and then I go right into my push-ups and I'm out of breath from my lunges, especially for the first couple of sets because I'm still kind of ramping things up. And now my push-ups are compromised. There's a million ways you could look at this, and there's no real way to get an answer without such experience. But that's what you want to base your decisions off of, is trying to figure out, all right, what's going to give me the easiest time of pushing my muscles harder? I'll say that again. What's going to make it the easiest to push your muscles hard? Because the easier it is to push your muscles, the easier it's going to be to create a stimulus for muscular adaptation, strength, hypertrophy, even endurance to a degree. We want to make it easy to push the muscles hard, which is why I love overcoming isometrics and progressive pull-ups and things, because I just find it's really easy to work my muscles a hell of a lot harder. So when you're programming your workouts, you want to make your programming suit that type of philosophy. I want to make it as easy as possible to just blast the mother living hell out of my muscles. And that's why we have the programming methodology we have in my grind style calisthenics program and my push pull squat program and stuff. That simple order of the exercises just makes it a lot easier to push the muscles a lot harder. And that's why we're doing that. But a lot of times when we're looking at different programming variables, like breaking up your lunges and stuff, we're kind of like, could it work? Maybe, yes, no. A lot of times when we're on the fence and like, yeah, maybe it'll make it easier, maybe it won't, usually means it's not going to really make any difference. Because if it does make a big difference, it's pretty self-obvious. Like, oh yeah, that'll be way better to do it that way. Yeah, let's do it that way, kind of thing. And if you're kind of on the fence, then just give it a shot and see what happens, because your experience should tell you right off the bat, oh yeah, this was way better. Or, oh man, that sucked. Yeah, I'm not doing that again. I could barely push my push and pull chain very hard because I was always out of breath. You'll know pretty quick. And again, if you're like, well, I don't know, I couldn't really tell a difference, well, there probably isn't one. Pure and simple. CE, thank you very much for the tip, $5 tip. Sincerely appreciate it. It's asking, what's your take on deadlifts? Beneficial or too risky? I think a lot of the risk, speaking of programming, comes from the programming of the exercises. So a lot of things out there are perfectly safe. Usually when you get the folks out there like, this is too risky of an exercise, or this type of training is too risky, it's usually because it's just being done poorly on the programming side of things. You can do things inherently very safe, but you got to program it very well. Now, my take in general, my personal experience with barbell lifts is don't take them to failure. Super high levels of fatigue, because barbell lifting for the most part, bench, dead, squat, cleans, overhead presses, these are exercises that typically involve a very hefty amount of weight, which is why a lot of people like it. It's kind of an ego thing. But they also require really dialed in technique in order to stay safe. Now, one of the things about exercise of any kind is that as your fatigue mounts, your ability to proficiently engage the muscles and create stability and all that will decrease at some point. As I tell the folks at the bodyweight gym, at some point, your push-ups are going to turn to trash if I just tell you to keep doing push-ups. You could have Captain America, awesomest, best, most beautiful push-ups in the world, but if you just keep doing push-ups, eventually they're going to look like cries for help. They're going to be ugly. And so that's the thing to be aware of with barbell lifts, especially, and deadlift goes under that category. When we try taking it to a high degree of fatigue, when we're really pushing those weights and stuff, especially if we don't have a good proficiency with it. And again, if you came to me and you're like, I want to make the deadlift a big part of my program, I'd be like, get a coach. It's like kettlebells. I started with kettlebells learning on YouTube. I was like, yeah, okay, I know how to do swings. I know how to do cleans. Yeah, I'm following, these YouTube videos I did. And then I went to an actual kettlebell seminar and I realized I had no clue what I was doing. I was like, but isn't it done like this? And the instructor was like, dear God, no, not unless you want to blow out your back. I was like, oh, geez, okay. The gold standard of coaching is always going to be one-on-one person, in-person training. We've got apps, we've got YouTube, we've got the internet and stuff. that kind of tries to teach us or convince us, oh, no, you can do this over. No, if you have a screen that you're getting instructions from, it's not going to be nearly as good as one-on-one. And I know AI is getting a lot better and everything, but I still would say that's going to be the gold standard for all time, one-on-one. So deadlift can be perfectly fine and great. It's wonderful. Personally, I've never really had much success with it. I've never felt very good about it. I've never felt like it really gets my hamstrings like bridging does. I've never felt like it was a good thing for my body in general. It usually feels beat up whenever I'm doing a lot of deadlifts. The isometric deadlifts are a bit of a different story. But even then, I'm doing like single leg deadlifts and stuff because I like using mechanical disadvantages. So that way I can really create a good stimulus and I don't need a lot of weight on the bar. But to each their own. I know some people, they'd be like, oh no, it's an amazing thing. Fine. Learn from those guys. If you find somebody who's like, oh yeah, the deadlift is my bread and butter and I put on 50 gazillion pounds of muscle with just this move, learn from them. Now, granted, yes, there's a very good chance that for whatever reason, they're just built for it better. Some people are just not built for the deadlift. And that's the other thing to consider as we're building this next 10 pounds of muscle is there's just some things that are just going to work better for you than other things. And I remember there was an interview I saw with Dorian Yates years ago, and he was talking about how the barbell back squat just wasn't his thing for building the legs. It's like, I'm always doing these barbell back squats. And I feel like good in the hips, but just couldn't get the quads lit up with that. It's just, But then he started using the leg press. The leg press? Oh, yeah, great. My quads blew right up on the leg press. And that was a case of him recognizing what just worked better for him. He's like, I know everybody says this exercise over here is awesome and great and wonderful and stuff, but listen to your body. It doesn't matter if everyone in your family and your best friend and everybody's swearing on a stack of Bibles that the deadlift is the best exercise of all time. If you're doing it and you're like, I always feel it in my lower back, never feel it in the muscles very much. It's uncomfortable. I'm beat up. I'm sore. I'm just not getting much out of it. But you do something like Romanian deadlifts or hip bridges or something along those lines. And you're like, whoa, holy smokes, hamstrings. Good Lord. Listen to that and do that. Okay? Listen to what your body's telling you. Do what feels best for you. And again, for me, barbell stuff never felt good for me. Even when I made it a staple of my program for 3 solid years, because I was like, I'm going to get this. I'm going to figure this out. I've got it. I don't want this to be a hang up or a hiccup in my training. And after 3 years, I was like, what am I doing this for? Like everything hurts. Everything's sore. I'm not making quite the progress I want. I'm not feeling things. It always feels uncomfortable. Like it's just not my thing. And then I discovered calisthenics. I was like, oh, yeah. Everything feels awesome. My joints feel better. My muscles are going nuts. I'm looking better. I'm feeling better. Listen to your progress. Success is the ultimate litmus test. Use things that give you those good, like, oh, this workout is amazing kind of feelings. This follows up. CE says, every influencer says deadlifts are key. Maybe you're right, though. Well, the influencers you're running across, remember, my friends, that the algorithms and the way that things are set up, especially on social media, is not to show you good information. It's to show you more of whatever information you're already consuming. Hey, look at my Instagram feed. All it is sports cars and cats. If you looked at my Instagram feed, you believe, well, the entire world is nothing but cat lovers and sports car drivers, because that's all there is on my Instagram feed, because that's all I keep watching. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, everything is about what can we show you? And the best things to show you are the things you're already watching. You're not going to get diverse opinions on these sorts of things. So if you, for whatever reason, you're watching things and everybody's like, deadlifts are awesome, you're subscribed to every power lifter in the world and stuff, then that's all you're going to see. There could be 1 billion people out there saying deadlifts are the worst thing for you. You're never going to hear it. You're never going to get across that information because the internet won't give it to you. You have to search it out. But again, a lot of stuff on social media and stuff is all superlatives. That's the new word I learned the other day, superlatives. Everything's the best of this and the worst of that, and the thing you need to do, and the thing you should never do. It's always the black and white extremes. But that's not how life works. That's how social media works for getting views. If I wanted to make a video, I'd be like, the deadlift is the worst thing ever. Don't ever do it. It's a bad exercise. You're guaranteed to become sterile and lose 10 years off your life from it. That's the stuff that gets views. Is it true? Not even remotely. But that's what people have to put out there to get views. And they're not putting it out there to be helpful. They're putting it out there to get views. And I'm certainly in that bag as well. I want to get lots of views. I pay my rent with this stuff, but I also want to be helpful too. So it's a little bit tricky and hard sometimes. But always remember that it's usually how you're doing the thing that hurts. So if you're not getting what you want out of something, it's usually your fault. Barbell stuff is not my bag. I don't get as much out of it. I'd much rather do other things. Could I learn how to use it better? Could I program it better? Could I have better technique and get a lot more out of it? Absolutely. I guarantee you, the fact that I don't get much from barbell deadlifts is entirely my fault. It has nothing to do with the exercise. But to be perfectly honest with you, I just don't care. I just don't care. It's like, I've got a million other things that can work my posterior chain. I don't need it. Nobody needs any particular exercise unless your goal is that exercise. So if you've got other options, well, then do the other options. You're not missing out on anything. And this is something that I address in my push-pull squat program too, about how the best type of movement patterns that are going to give you the biggest return on your investment for building muscle and strength are pushing, pulling, and squatting movements. And then everybody says, well, posterior chain, like, duh. Deadlifts. I'm like, yeah, take away deadlifts. What else you got? And a lot of people have no answer for me. It's like, yeah, exactly. Because the argument I make in that ebook is that your flexion, extension, and lateral chains, your support chains, are very important. And they're very key for function and health and stuff, but they're not that important for building up your body. Because I don't know anybody who's like, dude, I got so jacked from kettlebell swings. I got so big and ripped from ab crunches. I got so amazingly Captain America. I look so amazing from band chops and twists. You'll find that almost all of the support chain exercises that you have access to are very good and functional, and they should definitely be practiced, but they're not going to move the needle that much for muscle and strength. The deadlift is an exception that proves the rule. And that's why I tell people, yeah, go for it. Deadlift, awesome, wonderful. But don't feel like you have to do it, because most of your progress is push, pull, squat. I mean, hell, even back in the day, I remember a lot of bodybuilders I knew be like, yeah, we deadlift, but we don't really do a lot of it. It's not a big deal for us. We use it as a hip extension exercise. And even then, a lot of them will say, we just do Romanian deadlifts because it's more blasting the hamstring. It wasn't a huge thing back then. The deadlift and the bench press and the back squat is big because it's quantifiable and measured by sport of powerlifting. And that's why it's such a big thing. And a lot of times when people will say, oh, the deadlift is so important. No, working your posterior chain is important, because that's especially something that we all could use more of these days, because our backside is weak, it's tight, it's stiff, and it's not very well engaged. But you can do that 100,000 different ways. And so you don't need a deadlift for that. In fact, I would argue for most people, it's not going to be the best way to go about that. All right. Let's add some more questions here. I know I'm getting a little off topic, but still, you guys are so insightful for your wonderful questions. Mark Stockley. Well, watching this, I'm being recommended a video by Athlete X. Is he still around? I haven't heard much from Jeff these days. Entitled, These Exercises Are Key. Yes, which contradicts what you're saying about superlatives. I agree with you. Do which exercises you see are best for you. Absolutely. And again, that's the stuff, the superlatives. They're always out there. It's so weird. Like, I never really was aware of them until a friend of mine was like, everything's so superlatives, all like, what are you talking about? It's like, everything's the best. Everything, you got to do this, you got to do that. You have to, you can't, it's all black and white thinking. That's not how life works, my friends. But that's how social media works. And social media is not life. Okay. In Sal Bro saying bridges are alternative to deadlifts, also levers. Levers, I think, are great. the front lever really blew me away because I used to work as a fitness equipment installer. And so if you really want to know if something's working, especially for functional strength, install treadmills for a living. It's like being a piano mover. And at the time before that, I was doing kettlebell swings and deadlifts and stuff like that. And if you ask me, does it help you pick up and move a heavy treadmill? I'd be like, sure, yeah, sure, okay, I guess, maybe, sure. But then I started doing front levers, and wow, did that make a difference? Those treadmills got a hell of a lot lighter because I was using my front levers. So I'll definitely second that front lever. It's usually not brought up a lot when people compare body weight to weights and they're like, what's the equivalent? First off, there's no such thing as any exercise that's the equivalent of any other exercise because everything is going to create a specific adaptation to what you're doing. There's no such thing as any exercise that's going to make you strong at everything. No matter what you do, you're going to have weaknesses and shortcomings somewhere. The only question is, what weaknesses and shortcomings are you willing to accept? Or more importantly, it's better to be like, what kind of strength do you want to develop and when and where? And the levers are really good. And the thing I love about levers is they don't put any stress on your lower back. All right, next coming up. Hey, wanted to offer, commercial. This stuff gets really annoying, my friends. Sorry about that. Oh, I want to address something here real quick. Athlean X isn't as big because lots of people claim you use fake weights because bad info. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, information can be good only in its context, though. So always keep that in mind, folks. We're not the ones in charge here. You are. We have ideas. That's all we can do here on the internet. I've got an idea here. I've got an idea. This is what I've observed. This is what the research seems to say. I've got an idea that you should, if you want to build muscle, focus on push, pull, and squat. That's what I based that program off of. It's nothing more than an idea. Whether or not it's good information for you, that's your responsibility to know. So if I say push, pull, squat, don't worry too much about the support chain stuff. Use that as accessory work. It's your job to understand whether or not that applies to you, whether or not that's applicable to you. Because if it doesn't, then that's not bad advice. It's just not going to work for you. And that's your job to know that. And if you don't, well, then try it out, go by experience, listen to your experience, and then have the discipline to follow your lead, not mine. Because all I can do is give you ideas. But the funny thing on the weights side of things, because I've heard that of bodybuilders would use fake weights while doing like videos, or especially back in the day when they were, making magazines and photo shoots and everything like that. And I first heard that like plates made out of aluminum and stuff. I was like, that's ridiculous. That's so stupid. That's the cheaters, the fakers. Oh, that's ridiculous. Then I started making photographs or taking photos with a professional for all my book covers and everything. And it totally makes 100% sense because, my friend would be like, okay, I want you to hang from this tree branch in this pose with your legs over here. Good. And he would like take 1,000 photos of me in this pose. And it was like 5 more later, I'd have to be like, oh God, I got to stop. All right. It's like, I need 5 more, but you need to angle your body this way. It's like, okay, great. And it was so hard to do because it was basically trying to hold a position and make a hard thing look easy, right? And so then all of a sudden, those ideas of bodybuilders with fake weights, and I'm like, well, yeah, of course I would use fake weights. Because if I'm on a leg press with like 8 deep on the weight plates on each side, and they told me go down and hold for like 10 minutes while they get all these photographs, I'm not doing that with 600 pounds. Like, okay, but you got to give me some lighter weight, but it doesn't look very impressive if all you've got is a 135 on each side. So the whole idea of using fake weights for the sake of production values and things, I think I can understand that. I would probably do the same thing because it's not possible with the full weights. I don't know if that's why Jeff isn't doing it or anything, but sometimes, a 5-minute YouTube video can take 5 hours to film. And if you're lifting a weight to demonstrate something for 5 hours, it's just not going to happen with a regular weight. Nobody's going to be impressed if you're doing it with a 10-pound dumbbell. So there's a reason behind it. Not to defend too much on Jeff, but there's a reason why that sort of thing is done. Marco coming on. I used to train a gentleman by the name of Marco. Really cool dude. Anybody named Marco is probably really cool, I'm guessing. But anyway, let's get down to it. If you're doing cardio and strength in the same session, Doesn't matter if one does a cardio before or after for hypertrophy purposes. Again, we're looking at what's easier for you, my friend. What's easier for you to create the stimulus that you want? It depends on the cardio too. What are we talking about? 5 minutes of skipping rope, running a marathon, right? It depends on various things. Typically, though, you want to do the most important thing first. You just want to bring as much energy to the most important things you have. So if you are doing a hard leg training session, you're like, I'm going to blast the mother living hell out of my quads. And you're doing sissy squats and everything, and you're kind of stumbling, out of the squat rack afterwards, like, oh man, I can barely stand up. Well, time for cardio. Does it really matter if you're, able to use the elliptical very well? Or, does it really matter if you are using the elliptical well? Like, I need to be able to go at this level for this elevation for this amount of time, and I don't really care what I'm doing for strength training. Do the important thing first, but for most people, generally, it's not enough to really matter one way or the other, sort of thing. I usually always prefer doing strength and cardio different days, although today I did a strength workout before I went out biking because I knew that ride on Green Mountain, being the first one of the season, was just going to kick my butt and leave me tired and exhausted afterwards. I probably wouldn't even feel like doing a strength workout afterwards. So I got it done first to make sure it happened. Leonardo, hey Matt, how are you? Thank you very much. Nowadays, I'm training giving me a minimum number of reps that I want to do, and I see I can do many more than I increase the weight. Yep, I'm liking it. What do you think about it? For sure. Always remember, my friends, that your body is not consistent or always in a static state. We are always transient. And when we have a stated type of workout approach or program, we typically run a higher risk of being out of alignment with our current abilities. So some days you're going to be stronger. Some days you're going to be much not so strong. Adjust your workout accordingly. So some days, if you're on the pull-up bar and you bang out 10 reps, and my mental thing is if I could do 10 reps, I'm stopping and I'm going to make it harder. I'm not going to do 15. I'm just like, okay, I got to 10 reps. I can keep going. I need more weight. And some days I might get 8 for whatever reason. I'm using pausing or something, or just tired. I'm like, okay, 8 is what I get. I'm not going to add any type of weight or use a progressive technique from that. So on the days where you're like, I could keep going, yeah, definitely make it harder. By all means, if you have the runway to add weight, to add resistance, to make it harder, and your goal is to be stronger, because that's what you're going to be training while making it harder, by all means, don't be like, well, the program says I can only do this type of weight or this type of. If you can go for more, my friends. Don't hold yourself back, but at the same time, be forgiving of yourself. If it says you got to lift 150 and that day it just ain't happening, all right, bring it down to 130, 135 or so. Fine. Get what you can out of it. Don't beat yourself up and be like, oh no, what's wrong? What's wrong with my program? Oh, I'm such a worthless, weak piece of, don't do that. Don't do that. Work with whatever you have, because a lot of times creating a productive stimulus just means pushing and challenging yourself in whatever way you can for the day. And there's 1,001 influences that are going to be constantly in flux, that are going to change how you're feeling, what you can bring to the table every single workout, which is why when you can do more, do more. But when you're not up to snuff, don't worry about it too much. Just get what you can. It's going to be the smart way to go about it. ELL coming on in. Hey, Matt, thanks for bringing your thoughts to the world. Helped me out a lot. Happy to hear it. Thank you very much for letting me know. Dreamy is asking, hey, Matt, longtime follower here. Love your work. Thank you very much. For someone who struggles with exercise due to chronic fatigue, oh boy, that's a tough nut to crack. Sorry to hear that, my friend. What would you recommend for a minimal program to start building some strength, please? Well, for minimal, again, follow push-pull squat protocols with whatever methods and methodology that you like. What I would recommend is more along the lines of like my workout program, my micro workouts, because you want things to not take up a whole lot of energy. You don't have a whole lot to begin with most days. Some days you might feel amazing. That'd be great. And when those days come, take advantage of them. But instead, focus on very, very simple, basic things. And if I were you, I would just go with a push-pull squat format where you're doing one of those each day. You're doing a push chain workout one day, pull another, and squatting another. And then you can get some support stuff here and there wherever you feel like it. but don't feel like you've got to crush yourself in your workouts. You want to kind of make your workouts short, focused, and with very defined purpose. You don't want to go into your workouts thinking, I'm just going to drive myself into the ground, because you're already halfway there anyway. So you want to have a very clearly defined purpose of what you're trying to accomplish, maybe a good burn and fatigue in the muscles. And in your case, that may happen, in just a couple of good sets of push-ups, or building up to a couple of hard sets of pull-ups and so on. It doesn't need to be a lot. You don't need a lot of work to create a stimulus for hypertrophy. If that were the case, no one would ever build any muscle, because most of us build most of our muscle without any exercise. We're just getting exposed to whatever type of work and stimulus we have from our natural daily lives. So we don't need a minimum amount of work in order to create a stimulus. We just need some work. We just need it to some degree. So I would work with whatever energy level you have, focus on the basics, push, pull, and squat, and don't really push yourself into too much of a fatigue zone as far as a systematic fatigue. Muscular fatigue we want. Systematic fatigue, where you're like really just tired and you feel like you're spiraling down very, very quickly. Don't keep pushing more sets. Cut it out. Cut the workout there. You're done for the day. Go and recover, my friend. Best of luck with that chronic fatigue. Joe Greco is saying, hey, Matt, is static hold always the same? Resistance. I'm assuming that's resistance that you're putting on in there. Not always the same. It depends on what kind of static hold you're talking about. So are we coming up with yielding or overcoming isometrics? Yielding isometrics is pretty much about the same resistance, because that's usually a fairly static position for the body. But overcoming isometrics can be theoretically an infinite amount of resistance. Not always the same, but usually if you're holding up against the pull of gravity in some way, like my arm is out here, that's always going to be pretty much the same level of resistance. It's not going to be more resistance unless you add some sort of weight that makes that muscle have to work harder to hold that position. Coming back again, what's the best way to stay consistent? I'm going to have to cancel my gym membership due to insufficient funds at the moment, and I haven't been the most consistent with body weight only. So the question I would ask then is, are you still planning out your workouts? Because this is where a lot of people go off the rails when it comes to not working out in a gym. The thing about a gym that's great is that it's saying you work out when you go to this place at this time. So you're scheduling your workouts. You're like, this is the time after work, I go to the gym, I go to this place. It's a thing that's in your schedule. But when people can do something anytime, any place, anywhere, they have trouble being consistent because they don't have that structure. So give yourself that structure. Pencil in your workouts in your own schedule. This is what I do at this time of day, and so on. If you have that, that can probably be what's missing from your consistency right there. Still schedule your workout. Even though it doesn't feel like you need to, you still need to. Joe is saying, back again, what static hold resistance vary if weights are added, or is it generally the same? Like a static barbell curl against J hooks with just the bar versus 90-pound plates. Oh, it's definitely going to be more with the plates, for sure. For sure. So I'm assuming what you're talking about is you're pulling up, against something. So when you are lifting, I see where you're going with this, because you're pushing against the hooks as hard as you can. So then if you had 90 pounds, you're still pushing as hard as you can against the J hooks. Like, do the plates even matter? And you're kind of right in the fact that if you're just pushing as hard as you can, then no, you shouldn't, because you're theoretically using an overcoming isometric, and that's always going to be whatever you can bring to the table for tension. If you have those plates on, it shouldn't really matter. However, what those plates are doing is they're giving you a minimum that you have to work with. So if you've got the bare bar and you're pulling up as hard as you can keep holding and holding and holding and holding. And of course, your amount of tension reduces with fatigue until your bar can no longer be against those J hooks, and you're finally having to put it down. But with more weight, you're going to just hit that point faster. So it's giving you a bit more of a quantifiable metric for how much you're pushing against those J hooks. That's what those plates are doing, is they're giving you a quantification, not necessarily resistance. That's what the plates are doing. And in my own experience, it's a lot easier to push a lot harder when you do have some more weight or something that's saying you need to have more tension, because you could have an empty barbell pushing against it and you're like, yeah, that's all I've got. That's as hard as I can do. But it's not really as hard as you can do because you don't have any of that feedback coming of whether or not it's enough. Versus if you have the plates and you're still not touching the J hooks, you're like, no, I need more. I need more. That's why the beeps on the ISO chain and the ISO max work, because it's telling you whether or not you're producing enough tension or not. Insular Bro is saying being muscular looks better and is healthier. To a point, my friend, always to a point. Remember that. More is not always better, both in aesthetics and in health. Check out Mindful Mover program. Philip Chubb is always talking about how he basically pursued muscle at any cost. And he was like, yeah, I got as big and muscular as I could be. And honestly, I didn't look very good. And I sure as hell was not healthy. So there's always a point where it's not in your best interest, but usually not something that most of us are going to run against. All right. A lot of questions, a lot of chain of conversation here. Last Planet Fitness I went to was $25 a month. Also, I don't like Planet Fitness. I did work at a Planet Fitness, work out at a Planet Fitness one time, and it wasn't too bad. Very clean. That's usually the thing that I always set as a standard for any gym. It's like, is it just clean? Is it cluttered? Does it look like the staff there respects the space? Does it look like the people who work out there respect the space? Because you could have the most badass gym in the world, but if everybody doesn't respect the space and it's dirty and it's just crappy and everything, it's still a crappy gym, in my opinion. We want to have a place that we have respect for it, because then we're going to respect our time that's there. We don't respect the environment, we don't respect the time. But anyway, let's put a nice little bow on this whole idea of your next 20 pounds as we wrap up here, which is basically that progression is the name of the game for your next 10 pounds of muscle. And it's probably going to come from proficiency more than anything else. It's not going to necessarily come from doing more sets, more exercises, more of this, more of that. It's probably going to come a lot more from doing things better. And if you don't know how to do things better, hire a coach. Hire someone who's been down the path before you, because they'll probably tell you in 5 minutes more than you're going to learn in 5 months on your own. Because they'll find, oh yeah, if you put your elbow in here, if you change out this thing in your diet and you do this and you do that, bang, you're off and to the runnings again. Because we're always going to be running against the limitations of our own perceptions and our own experience. And don't underestimate, sometimes there's a lot of value in just having someone there who can be like, yeah, I know you got 10 pull-ups. Why did you stop? Well, that's all I could do. It's like, why did you stop? Well, that's all I can do. Why did you? That's all I can do, man. It's like, no, I don't buy that. I want 15. And that's amazing. It's my job a lot of times when I am working with a client and they're like, I just can't get past this limit. A lot of times I find it's like you're working against your own limits. Trust me, you're not even close to failure. I know you feel like you're lifting to failure. You're not even close. You've got at least 3 more repetitions. And just being able to have that pointed out, if they're not fighting me too much, and be like, oh, wow, yeah, I got 15 reps there. It's like, there we go. Just someone who can help you realize that you have more potential than you realize for yourself. Because a lot of times that is the case for you folks, for all of us. We are inhibiting our own self from our own limited self-perceptions. We can be capable of so much more. And just realizing that we can be capable of more allows us to go farther than we currently are. So again, thanks for watching. Check out all the books in the RDP library down below in the description. I was mentioning grind style calisthenics and micro workouts, overcoming isometrics, and all of those others can be helpful in helping you achieve that next 10 pounds of gains. Don't forget to check out RDP on the Instagrams. And thanks very much for watching. Again, I'll try and get this out on Sunday next week because I'll be at the Taekwondo tournament all Saturday, and then hopefully back to our regularly scheduled programming on Saturday afternoons. But till then, thank you very much, everybody, for watching and listening. Be fit and live free.